All right, let's get this shit over with. Come on. Have a seat. Don't get too comfortable, though. You're never going to see this office ever again.
Oh, I'm going to talk as white as I can during this interview.
The rise of multiple job interviews. What's behind the trend? Getting invited to a second interview has become synonymous to getting a gold star from the company. It shows they're really interested in you. A third interview? It might mean they're close to offering you the job. But what about when the interviews keep going and you find yourself in a fourth, fifth, or even sixth round? And worse, you're not sure if this is the final stretch or if there are more rounds to come? It's like being stuck in a job interview midpoint. But what exactly is responsible for the rise in this trend? And could it be going away anytime soon? Join us as we unravel the rise of multiple job interviews and what's behind this trend, Job Seeker's Dilemma. Earlier this year, Mike Conley, a 49-year-old software engineering manager from Indiana, USA, found himself in a tough spot. He had lost his job during the pandemic and was actively seeking a new role. His journey was marked by a series of frustrating encounters with prospective employers. First, 5 companies informed him they had to delay hiring due to COVID-19, but only after he had completed the final round of interviews. Then, 3 other companies invited him for multiple rounds of interviews, only to decide to promote internally when it was time to extend an offer. Later, he went through 3 rounds of interviews for a director-level position at a company he really liked, only to be told he would need to go through 6 more rounds. When he asked the internal HR if these were the final rounds, I received a vague response. "We don't know yet," Conley recalls. Faced with uncertainty and a seemingly endless interview process, Conley made the difficult decision to withdraw his application. He shared his experience on LinkedIn, expecting to resound with others in similar situations. To his surprise, the post went viral, garnering 2.6 million views and thousands of supportive comments. It turns out many others had similar experiences. When they learned about the extensive interview rounds, they withdrew too, Conley says. "I never anticipated the post would go viral, but I wanted to reassure people going through similar struggles that they're not alone." Conley's story is just one of many shared online by frustrated job seekers, particularly in the tech, finance, and energy sectors, where interview processes often become prolonged and demanding. This raises important questions. How many rounds of interviews are reasonable for employers to assess candidates effectively? And how long should candidates endure uncertainty about the interview process before deciding to step back? The importance of streamlined hiring companies want to avoid making mistakes when hiring, as it can be expensive and time-consuming. So, they often take a careful and thorough approach to the recruitment process. This involves conducting multiple interviews to gather as much information as possible about each candidate. Ideally, this investment of time and effort pays off for everyone. It helps ensure that the chosen candidate is well suited for the job, reducing the likelihood of future problems. It also saves the company from having to start the hiring process from scratch. Businesses usually set up multiple interviews and tests to make sure they've got the right person for the job. It's like going through a series of checkpoints to see if a candidate's qualifications match up, if they can actually do the job, and if they'll fit in with the team. Jenny Ho, who heads up a recruitment agency in Singapore called International Workplace Consulting, has some wise words about this process.
I think it's going to be harder and harder to be in the startup world because a lot of the stories, a lot of the playbook, because of internet, because of information transparency, it's already out there. So I think for the entrepreneurs, I really would...
She says the number of interviews should match the job's level. So for top-tier roles like directors, you might expect around 3 to 4 rounds of interviews. But for positions below that, 2 to 3 rounds should do the trick. Think of it like Goldilocks trying out different chairs. Some are too big, some are too small. But there's always one that's just right. So Jenny's saying you want just the right amount of interviews, enough to make sure you're making a good choice, but not so many that you're wasting everyone's time. Having a simple and efficient hiring process is like having a secret weapon in the job market jungle. Take Google, for instance. They did some serious digging into their past interviews and found out that after 4 rounds, they were pretty darn confident about their hiring decisions, with an 86% success rate. They figured out that after those 4 rounds, getting more feedback from interviewers didn't really make much of a difference. Before, If you applied for a job at Google, you might have felt like you were running a marathon with all the interviews you had to go through, sometimes more than a dozen. But now, they've trimmed it down. They realized that they didn't need a whole army of interviewers to make smart hiring choices. Just 4 interviewers can do the trick, making decisions that used to require a whole battalion. It's like they've cracked the code to finding the right people without all the concern. Ho emphasizes the importance of having the right people in the hiring process. This typically includes the potential employee's future boss, their immediate supervisor, and someone from HR. If it's a bigwig position like a C-suite role, then other top-level executives might join in, along with some seasoned employees for good measure. But you don't want to go overboard. There's this idea that there's always a better candidate out there, so companies end up bringing in more interviewers, Ho explains. But sometimes it just messes things up even more. Having too many interviewers can scatter the focus during questioning and make the candidate feel a bit uneasy, and it might just lead to chaos. Risk losing candidates. That is what John Sullivan, who knows a thing or two about hiring people, is saying about finding the best job candidates. He is like the wise old owl perched in Silicon Valley, sharing his knowledge about hiring. According to him, companies need to set a solid deadline for making a hire right from the get-go. Why? Because the top-notch candidates don't hang around in the job market for too long.
And if you hire John, you're not. So the business impact increases by knowing what source works. We call it right day recruiting. So I was going to hire someone from Hillary's campaign a week ago. They weren't interested, but they changed their mind.
You have to make your wish fast before they disappear into the night. And here is where the cautionary tale of Conley comes in. He went through this long, drawn-out interview process, and guesses what? It left him feeling like he was stuck in a waiting room with outdated magazines. Not exactly the kind of experience that screams, "Sign me up!" So, yeah, dragging out the interviews can actually make those awesome candidates lose interest in the job. It is like watching a thrilling movie, but then it takes forever for the climax to arrive. You start checking your watch and wondering if it is worth sticking around. In a recent survey conducted by Robert Half, a global staffing firm, it was found that a whopping 62% of professionals in the US tend to lose interest in a job if they don't hear back from the employer within 2 weeks after their initial interview. That is just 10 business days. And guess what? If there is still radio silence after 3 weeks, that number shoots up to 77%. While Paul McDonald, a senior executive director at Robert Half based in Los Angeles, sheds some light on the hiring timeline in the US. He mentions that things have been a bit up and down lately. During 2020 and early 2021, when the pandemic was in full swing, the time it took to hire someone stretched out. Companies were sort of breadcrumbing candidates, kind of leading them on. But now, McDonald notes, things have shifted. It's more streamlined these days. He warns that if any companies are still dragging their feet in the hiring process, they are taking a big risk. With so many job opportunities out there, candidates won't wait around forever. They all just move on to the next one. It's not just about losing out on potential hires. There is more at stake here. According to the Robert Half survey, about 26% of the folks surveyed said they would not hesitate to leave a negative comment anonymously on review sites if they felt like they were being threaded along by a company. That could really put a dent in a company's reputation and make it harder for them to attract top-notch talent in the future. But let's give these companies the benefit of the doubt. Sometimes delays in the hiring process happen for legit reasons. Maybe there is some budget shuffling going on, or some unexpected stuff came up that is out of their control. You know how it goes. But if they don't communicate those reasons clearly, it is like waving a red flag in front of job seekers. McDonald over at Robert Half has some wise words on this. He says that how a company handles indecision can tell you a lot about its culture. If they are dragging their feet after multiple interviews, it could be a sign of what it is like to work there. After all, if they can't make up their minds about hiring you, what else might they be wishy-washy about? It is definitely something to think about. He adds, feeling worn out from interviews is not just a candidate thing. Managers can feel it too. McDonald says candidates should feel comfortable asking why there is another round, especially if it is tough for them to take more time off from their current job. And if you got to step back, do it gracefully, he says.
To the U.S., 8.4 million people in the nation are working multiple jobs.
850,000 jobs.
Wages went up for American workers.
I get on the train at 7:30 and I don't get home till like 6:15 earliest, and then like I don't have time to do anything. I don't.
Building bad processes. Picture Conley, a job hunter from Indiana, exposing the tricky waters of job hunting. He is like many of us, trying to find the right fit, but not always feeling like it is getting anywhere. Now, here is where the plot thickens. Instead of venting his frustrations by naming and shaming the company that ghosted him after an interview, Conley took a different route. He opted for a tactful approach, choosing not to expose names in his LinkedIn post. And guess what? That small act of consideration turned into something unexpectedly wonderful. A LinkedIn user came across his post and thought, "This guy has got something. Let me connect him with someone who might appreciate his talents." Lo and behold, Conley gets introduced to the CEO of a startup focused on helping students break into the job market. Fast forward through 4 interviews, and boom, he is offered a position as the VP of Software Engineering. Talk about a plot twist. But wait, there is more. Conley's story doesn't stop there. Riding on the wave of attention, he decides to start a podcast about job hunting, sharing his insights and experiences. Plus, he is being courted for consulting gigs, advising companies on how to fix their hiring processes to be more candidate-friendly. Reflecting on his journey, Conley admits he wishes he'd been bolder earlier on. And better late than never, right? He's learned to value himself more, recognizing his worth in the job market. And even after all the loops he had to jump through, he's still got a heart of gold. He understands that companies are not intentionally trying to make the hiring process